dumbest weapons the military almost built. What if you could win a war by just making enemy soldiers really, really attracted to each other? No bullets, no bombs, just weaponized horniness. The U.S. Air Force actually researched this, and I'm not making this up. So, it's 1994, and the Wright Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio has a big brain idea. They submit a proposal for a non-lethal chemical weapon that would, and I quote, disrupt enemy discipline by causing homosexual behavior. They wanted $7.5 million to develop it, $7.5 million, to make an aphrodisiac bomb. They literally called it the gay bomb, and somehow this made it past the proposal stage. Here's the concept. You load up a bomb with powerful pheromones or hormones, drop it on enemy troops, and boom! Suddenly, everyone's attracted to their battle buddies. The military genuinely believed that if soldiers started finding each other hot, they'd just forget about fighting and unit cohesion would collapse. Because apparently the Pentagon thought war zones would turn into a rom-com where everyone drops their rifles to make out. Gentlemen, what if instead of killing them, we just made them really horny? Johnson, you're promoted. The proposal even suggested it would make enemies a laughingstock. The psychological warfare potential was supposedly off the charts. So, did it work? Well, here's the thing. They never actually built it. Turns out, and this might shock you, there is no magical chemical that can just turn people gay. Crazy, right? Scientists probably sat there like, so, you want us to invent a potion that changes sexual orientation? Yes. That's not how chemistry works. Just try. Also, even if such a thing existed, trained soldiers in combat situations might have priorities beyond sudden attraction. Like, I don't know, not dying? Picture what the Pentagon imagined would happen. Sarge, did you feel that weird mist? Yeah, it smells kind of floral. Anyway, we need to secure that. Wait, have your eyes always been that blue? What? We're in the middle of a firefight. I know, but you look really good holding that rifle. Steve, focus. The enemy is... Are you flexing right now? Maybe. The whole concept completely ignores discipline, survival instinct, and basic human psychology. Not to mention, this might be the most offensively homophobic weapon ever conceived. But hey, points for creativity? The gay bomb was ultimately rejected and never developed. The military learned a valuable lesson that day. Maybe don't try to weaponize people's sexuality. Just stick to regular explosives like normal countries. At least those make sense. The Nazis looked at the sun, you know, that giant ball of nuclear fire 93 million miles away, and thought, we could weaponize that. They wanted to build a mile-wide mirror in orbit to focus sunbeams and incinerate entire cities, because regular bombing wasn't Bond villain enough. During World War II, German physicist Hermann Oberth dusted off a 1920s concept and seriously proposed building what they called the Sungewehr, or sun gun. The idea was to construct a massive orbital mirror about 5,500 feet across, that's over a mile wide, positioned 5,100 miles above Earth. This floating death ray would concentrate solar energy into a focused beam capable of boiling oceans and setting cities on fire from space. Basically, they wanted to build the world's most terrifying magnifying glass to play God with ants, except the ants were allied cities. The Nazi plan called for a space station made of metallic sodium that would track targets on Earth and reflect concentrated sunlight at them. Scientists calculated it would take about 15 years to build and could instantly boil water or ignite wood and flesh on contact. Just aim your giant orbital murder mirror at London and boom! City-size fire. Some Nazi engineer probably walked into a meeting like, what if we make the sun angry at our enemies? And everyone else just nodded like this made perfect sense. The engineering drawings exist, by the way. Actual Nazi scientists sat down and did the math on how to build a sun laser in space. Someone got paid to draft blueprints for this thing. Shockingly, and I cannot stress this enough, the Nazis never built their space death ray. Why not? Well, maybe because this was the 1940s and launching anything into orbit was pure science fiction. Sputnik didn't go up until 1957, and that was just a tiny beeping ball. Hans, how do we get the Mir into space? Hans? We haven't figured that part out yet. The sun gun would require launching thousands of tons of material into space using rocket technology that barely existed. The resources needed would bankrupt a nation. Also, minor detail, they lost the war before they could try. After the war, American investigators found the sun gun plans and basically went, neat, before filing them under cool but impossible. The concept remains one of history's most ambitious supervillain schemes that thankfully never left the drawing board. Thanks for nothing, physics. Imagine pressing a button and triggering a massive earthquake that levels an enemy capital. No missiles, no troops, just weaponized geology. Multiple countries spent decades researching this, and some people still think it's real. During the Cold War, both the US and USSR asked themselves, can we weaponize earthquakes? The idea gained traction after underground nuclear tests proved that big explosions could trigger seismic activity. Suddenly, everyone's paranoid. Conspiracy theories explode about tectonic weapons that could artificially trigger earthquakes along fault lines. The Soviets supposedly had earthquake machines. The U.S. allegedly had secret installations generating seismic waves. Even New Zealand got in on it with Project SEAL in the 1940s, testing whether underwater explosions could create weaponized tsunamis. The theory sounds simple on paper. Find spots where tectonic plates are already stressed, deliver precisely calculated amounts of energy through underground nukes or resonance devices, and trigger a catastrophic earthquake that looks totally natural. Some proposals involve creating artificial fault lines or using synchronized explosions to amplify seismic waves. The dream scenario? Cause devastation that appears to be an act of God while maintaining complete deniability. What earthquake weapon? That was just nature, bro. Here's the problem. Earthquakes are stupidly complicated. Like orders of magnitude more complicated than anyone thought. While nuclear tests could cause tremors, generating a full-scale earthquake would require energy levels beyond any practical weapon. You can't just tickle a fault line and expect it to cooperate. Hey, San Andreas Fault, do me a favor and destroy California. No. Please. No. Mother Nature doesn't take orders. Project SEAL's tsunami tests, they made tiny waves, barely splashes. The conspiracy theories about secret tectonic weapons, pure fantasy. Turns out the Earth's crust is really, really hard to control, and also doesn't care about your military objectives. Despite decades of research and wild speculation, no functional earthquake weapon has ever been proven to exist. Sometimes nature's power is too chaotic to harness, and maybe that's for the best. The Earth remains undefeated. A famous behavioral psychologist once convinced the U.S. military to let pigeons control guided missiles. Yes, actual living birds, pecking at screens to guide bombs. And it actually worked, which somehow makes it funnier. It's 1940, and guided missiles suck. They're wildly inaccurate because electronic guidance systems are primitive garbage. Enter B.F. Skinner. Yes, the Skinner from psychology class, who walks into a military office and says, "What if we train pigeons to do it?" And somehow the National Defense Research Committee says yes and funds Project Pigeon, later renamed Project Orcon for Organic Control. Sir, our guidance systems keep failing. What if we use birds? I'm sorry, what? Birds, sir. Train them to peck at screens. Get it? No, wait, hear me out! I cannot overstate how desperate the military must have been to greenlight what if birds flew the missiles. Here's how this absolute fever dream worked. Using operant conditioning, Skinner trained pigeons to recognize target images. The birds would be strapped into the nose cone of a missile, facing a screen showing the forward view. When the pigeon saw the target, it would peck the screen, and those pecks would send electrical signals to adjust the missile's flight path. For redundancy, each missile had 3 pigeons, basically democracy by bird. The pigeons wore tiny jackets, had comfortable little cockpits, and would guide the missile right up until the moment of impact when they'd be vaporized. Brutal, but effective? Here's the kicker. It actually worked, like really well. Skinner's demonstration showed that trained pigeons could accurately guide simulated missiles even with crazy distractions and disorientation. The birds performed better than early electronic systems, so why didn't we get pigeon-guided nukes? Because when you walk into the Pentagon and say, our advanced guidance system is birds, absolutely nobody takes you seriously, even when you prove it works. Gentlemen, may I present Project Pigeon? That's just a bird. Yes, but a trained bird. Get out. The military just couldn't get past the absurdity. By the time Project Orcon got revived in the 1950s, electronics had caught up and everyone quietly agreed to pretend the pigeon thing never happened. Project Pigeon proved that sometimes the problem isn't functionality. It's the sheer ridiculousness of saying, birds are piloting our missiles with a straight face. Skinner's pigeons were accurate, reliable, and doomed by optics. Some British spy looked at a dead rat and thought, you know what would make this better? Explosives. And that's how Operation Rat Bomb was born. Yes, really, exploding dead rats. It's 1941, and the British Special Operations Executive, basically the spy agency that does all the weird stuff, develops a truly unhinged sabotage weapon. The concept is beautifully simple. Kill some rats, gut them, stuff them with plastic explosives, sew them back up, and smuggle them into Nazi-occupied Europe. The plan relies entirely on German efficiency. See, coal-fired boilers were everywhere in factories, and dead rats near coal piles would naturally get tossed into furnaces. When heated, kaboom! It's genius precisely because it's so stupid that nobody would see it coming. The SOE actually manufactured around 100 explosive rat corpses. Each rat was carefully prepared to look totally normal, just your average dead rodent with plastic explosives hidden in the body cavity. Someone's actual job was stuffing dead rats with explosives. Think about that. What do you do for a living? I'm in rodent ordnance. The theory was perfect. A German worker finds a dead rat near the coal pile, thinks, ugh, gross, and tosses it into the boiler without a second thought. The resulting explosion would be unexpected, hard to trace, and create chaos. Even better, if the rats were discovered before use, the Germans would waste massive resources searching for more, creating paranoia either way. Psychological warfare through rodent terror. Here's where it gets beautiful. The Germans found the first shipment before deployment. Total failure, right? Wrong. The Nazis completely lost their minds. They issued warnings across occupied territories, forced workers to inspect every single dead rat they encountered, and wasted countless man-hours on rodent paranoia. Imagine being a German soldier. Hans, check that rat. It's just a dead rat. Check it anyway. The exploding rats never actually exploded anything, but they succeeded in making an entire military apparatus terrified of dead animals. The sabotage goal was achieved without a single detonation. The rats became psychological weapons just by existing. Not a single explosive rat ever blew up its intended target. But the SOE considered Operation Rat Bomb a success anyway. Sometimes the best weapon is just making your enemy paranoid about whether that dead rat is secretly a bomb. Mission accomplished. The British wanted to build an aircraft carrier the size of the Empire State Building out of ice. A floating iceberg warship. And they almost did it. This is not a joke. It's 1942, and the British have a problem. German U-boats are shredding Allied shipping in the Atlantic, and traditional carriers are expensive and torpedo magnets. Geoffrey Pike, an inventor so eccentric that eccentricity itself would file a restraining order, proposes the most bonkers solution imaginable: build massive, unsinkable aircraft carriers out of ice. He names it Project Habakkuk, and somehow Winston Churchill is intrigued enough to authorize actual research. The proposed ship would be 2,000 feet long with a 40-foot thick hull made of pykrete, a mixture of ice and wood pulp that's way stronger and more heat-resistant than regular ice. Picture this: an enormous floating iceberg hollowed out to accommodate aircraft. Pykrete is genuinely impressive stuff. Bullets bounce off of it, it melts incredibly slowly, and any damage could theoretically be repaired by just spraying more ice slurry onto the hull. The ship would be so massive that torpedoes would barely scratch it. Sir, what if the enemy torpedoes us? Well, we're made of ice, so... So we sink immediately? No, you idiot. We're an iceberg. Icebergs float. Oh my god. You're right. And you're promoted. Refrigeration equipment would keep the whole thing frozen even in warm waters. The British even built a scale prototype on a Canadian lake to prove the concept. It would be the ultimate unsinkable vessel because how do you sink something that's essentially already an iceberg? The prototype worked. Pykrete was legit. So why aren't there ice carriers today? Because the scale was absolutely batshit insane. A full-size habakkuk would require 1.7 million tons of pykrete, refrigeration systems consuming ungodly amounts of power, and over 2 years to build. Sir, how much steel do we need for this ice ship? Oh, roughly enough to build 5 full-size aircraft carriers. 5 carriers worth? That's for the entire ship, though, right? Oh, no. That's just for the refrigeration units. The refrigeration? Just the refrigeration, yes, sir. To keep the ice cold? Precisely. I quit. The steel needed just for the refrigeration could build multiple conventional carriers. By 1943, aircraft range improved enough to cover the Atlantic Gap, and regular escort carriers became available. The project was quietly canceled, and everyone agreed to never speak of the ice ship again. The prototype was left to melt into history. Project Habakkuk proved that just because you can engineer something doesn't mean you should. The ice carrier remains one of the most ambitious what if we just moments in military history. Brilliant in concept and practical in execution, and absolutely wild in hindsight. So yeah, militaries are weird. If you want more unhinged historical garbage, hit subscribe and check out this video right here. I'll see you there.